All right. I am joined with Teresa Tapia and Robert Tapia. Um, I'm really excited about this show because, I've known both of you for a very long time, man. I consider you both very good friends. And I was privileged to know Johnny Mi Vida Loca Tapia towards the ending of my career. And I follow his life very closely. He has an incredible life, plagued with addiction, um, you know, trouble, run-ins with the police. He's had a very turbulent life, and he still managed to become a five-time world champion, Teresa?
Well, he claims five. He was actually a six. So isn't that nice that you don't have to, you can pick and choose what you want to claim?
Okay, he still did it, and he's the most beloved athlete I think that's ever come out of Albuquerque. Loved by I mean, his funeral alone was what 7,000 people. Is that correct?
It was over, and over 2,000 people were turned away because they didn't think it was going to be that big. Therefore, they didn't have the manpower to be able to seat that many people and take care of that many people. So it was, which that was the only disappointing thing, because Johnny would have been happy. He didn't like anyone being turned away, and there was over 2,000 people that they have on record that just couldn't get in.
And I'll say, Johnny Tapia, for those of you, my audience that do not know him, um, what an inspiration he was to the boxing world and the sports world. He was although he was plagued with addiction and anxiety and depression, his story is nothing short of inspiring. So, without further ado, I'm joined by Teresa Tapia, his widow, and Robert Tapia, who's the matchmaker and coordinator of Team Tapia, and they're getting ready to have some fights in November at the Inn of the Mountain Gods, Ponce de Leon versus Marco Antonio Barrera. Two old guys going at it again. But hey, they're both legends, and I think it's going to be a hell of a fight. But before we get into that and you guys start promoting the show, let's talk more about Johnny's life. I know both of you know him very well, and the books he has, Mi Vida Loca. You can show the books right now if you want, Teresa. They're both available on Amazon, correct?
Yes, they are. You can get them anywhere. So there's both of them.
The Ghost of Johnny Tapia and Mi Vida Loca. And I got to tell people, I have found this man to be so inspiring. And he's a little guy. He was a bantamweight, but that little guy walked into a room, he'd light up the room. He was a presence. Everybody wanted to know him. He was a little spark plug. He was an amazing human being. So, where do we even start with this? Teresa, I followed his career my whole entire life. He was like I guess you could say I was a heavyweight, but he was supernatural in his abilities. He was an amazing athlete. He was an amazing fighter. Where did this all begin with you? You two are like the biggest love story in boxing. I mean, it's the craziest romance. It's the craziest story of partnership that I've ever heard in boxing. You were his strength through drug addiction and his turmoil. So you met Johnny when? Let's just start from the beginning.
Well, I met Johnny in the 90s, and obviously he had been fighting before that, but I didn't know him. I didn't even know who he was when I first met him. But like you pointed out, his life has been full of tragedy. His life started off in Albuquerque at Wells Park. It was a tough neighborhood. He grew up, his mom was murdered when he was 8 years old, which.
So hold on, so people understand. His mom was killed, murdered in front of. Was it in front of him, or did he hear about this afterwards? I can't remember that part of the story.
Okay, so how it all happened is he was the only child at the time. His mom used to spoil him, and one night she dropped him off at his grandparents' house. And this is an important part of the story because it'll show you how his nature was. So he was just this innocent, fun-loving little boy. And that night, he didn't want to stay at his grandparents, and he kept crying and saying, I don't want you to go. Johnny, when he would tell a story, his memory was so like on point. She was wearing blue dark slacks, a white shirt, a blouse, and because he was so distraught, she handed him a Snickers bar and a Dr. Pepper. So fast forward, we'll get to that and why it's significant. But she left that night and didn't come home. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, he woke up his grandparents and said that he saw this like a blue or green truck that looked like his mom was being held against her will by some men, and she was screaming, and he went and woke him up, and basically he got hit for it, and they told him go back to bed. Well, 3 days later they ran a story in the newspaper because they had found a Jane Doe, and she had special unique jewelry that the family recognized, went to the hospital, and it definitely was Virginia. And she actually, it was just such a crazy story. The guy that murdered her, that we found out later on in life, actually snuck into the hospital and hit her over the head as she's laying in a coma. Like, this story is just so, it's beyond
But
tragic.
she was stabbed like how many times?
22. She was
She
stabbed.
was stabbed 22 times and raped, correct?
Yes, and Johnny used to say she was stabbed with an ice pick, and that's not correct because we have the police reports. It was she was brutally stabbed with a screwdriver and it broke off in her. Then he finished her with a pair of scissors. And it was such, I mean, there was parts of her body that were almost completely severed. And that lady still survived and was trying to crawl to a house. She was dumped in some gravel pits in the South Valley, and she did see some light that she was trying to crawl to. The next day, the construction crew that came on site saw her, and she was still alive. And she held on for about 5 more days, and she finally succumbed to her injuries and passed away.
But her final injury was this guy sneaking into the hospital and hitting her over the head.
Yes, and it's on the police reports that the police, the hospital notified the police. And back in those days, it was the 70s, it wasn't, sadly, it was not a priority. She was a Hispanic woman no one cared about, and she was a poor Hispanic woman. So they just didn't get the attention, but it did something to Johnny and ignited this fuel in him and this fire that he just wanted to fight everybody. He was angry from that day forward, and that's all he did was fight after that. And I ran into a friend of his the other day, and he knew Johnny since Johnny was a baby, and he was saying they remembered at the funeral, this guy's 12 and Johnny was 8 at the time. He lifted him up to look in the coffin, and it just like was heartbreaking. It made me like teary-eyed. But Johnny's this little boy looking over her coffin, and he was touching all of her stab wounds and crying, like, look what they did to my mama, look what they did. Well, he said in the neighborhood, there was, cruel kids, and they'd say, oh, Johnny, your mom's dead, your mom's dead. Well, Johnny would attack him. So he just started becoming this little scrapper because you didn't talk about his mom. So that's how it all started, the road to him fighting at 8. So fast forward, he ended up winning every title you can think of in boxing.
What age did he start boxing?
Well, he tried at first at 9, and he got kicked out because he kicked the kid. So then he went back again at 12, and he was just very good at it. And so he won every national, state title you could think of. Yeah, Golden Gloves, everything you could think of.
I've heard many times Johnny say that he found his peace in the ring.
He did.
That's a place where he found his peace, and because his life was so turbulent that he actually found peace fighting.
Yes. And how many people can say that, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of identify in the same way. I have a crazy mind, and my escape was boxing. So I'm pretty sure with Johnny, his was exactly the same thing. I mean, the thing that's so astonishing about Johnny is that he, a lot of people said you could throw him in the dumpster and he'll climb out smelling like roses. That's just Johnny, man. He'll come out, you throw him in a trash can, he comes out shining. And I've always found inspiration in Johnny, and I've always known he had a very just meeting the guy. When I met him, the many times I've met him, you can see the turmoil in his soul, the tortured soul, and you can see the anxiety. He admits the anxiety. Like, he's always happy-go-lucky, he always hugs everybody. He's a very loving, caring person, but you could see the tortured soul, right?
Yes. And he used to say that. I remember when I met him, and obviously we got married and started our life together. There was times that he would just like take this look and say, you were just too late for me. I wish I would have met you before I was so broken, because nothing can fill the void that I face every day of my life. And I never understood it, David. Like I used to look at him and say, why can't we be enough? Why can't the kids be enough? Well, he would say, my life has just been such a hard road that you came in way too late. So after he passed, now I understand, because now I have that void. So people, it's so weird. It's just weird how life happens and how things turn around, because now people ask me like, why aren't you happy? Well, because that was my partner, and we had a life, and we had it mapped out, and we chose to be together. We chose to have kids. We chose everything that we're doing in life. So now it's funny because now I'm the tortured soul. And my grandma used to say, she was a Native American lady, and she used to say, you got to let him go. She wasn't alive when he died, but other people that passed before us, she'd always say, let them go so they can rest in peace, because if you don't let them go, they're not resting in peace. Well, I'm not gonna let him go, because if you don't let me rest in the living, I'm not gonna let him rest in the peace.
And I know that he really, Teresa and I was witness to this. He really latched onto you. I mean, you were like his saving grace. He didn't like to go anywhere without you. He had serious separation anxiety. And am I right in saying that?
Absolutely.
The only time that Johnny was able to, get away from me was when he was doing something wrong, because he didn't want me to stop him. And then I knew he was doing something wrong because he wouldn't answer his phone. He would disappear for days. And, like I said, my life with him, I was with him 20 years.
But hold on, this is the common traits. These are common traits of an addict. And this is what's so dynamic about Johnny is the duality he faced. He had this incredible, he was a world champion. Do you know how dedicated you have to be a world champion? A world champion, but he was also a struggling addict.
Yes.
And the reason I identify with Johnny so much is because I suffered from so many of the same problems. I mean, I'm just nearly sober, but I had the same problems as Johnny. Johnny was a lot more hardcore than I was. He made me look like a schoolboy.
I don't know about that. I was around you too. I don't know.
but I can understand what he said, that he was broken and that you came in too late.
Yes.
I can identify with that. I think a lot of fighters are very broken, self-destructive, broken people to begin with, and that's why they choose that profession. And that profession does end up saving them. Could you go into some of the stories, Teresa, that my audience would find inspirational about how you saved him from his addiction, how you helped him with his addictions? I know you actually locked him into a house and got him clean, correct?
Yes. So that was the first time I think that I took charge, because I had been with Johnny about a year at that time, and we went through so many ups and downs as a married couple, and with his addiction. I mean, I had lost babies. It was just, there was so many things, and he was in jail at the time. And I remember, he kept calling me from jail, and I was like, I'm done. I want a divorce. And I remember at that time, his manager was Paul Chavez. He called me up and said, look, I want Johnny to come back to boxing. And I didn't even know Johnny as a boxer. So that was foreign to me. And he said, he's clean in jail, and, let's give it a shot. And I said, well, then you deal with them. And I remember Paul saying, oh no, I wouldn't trust him in my house. And I thought, okay, but you want to send him to me, so that was like our conversation. That's how it all started. So Johnny got out of jail. And it's funny, like I said,
how many times did Johnny go to jail?
Oh man.
Countless, right?
Yes, there was some, the funny thing, David, is he's the only person that had jail credit, because one time he was in there so long, they didn't even know why they had him, and he had credit, and he used to joke about it and say, I have good credit in jail. I have to get out of jail, because he didn't even know why he was there. He was always used to being there.
So you knew he was getting in trouble when he would leave you.
Oh yeah.
And go off and fall into his addictions, right? You knew if he was gone for a few days, you knew what he was up to.
Well, think about it. Our wedding night, I remember, like, I'm sure nobody matches this wedding night, but I remember getting married. He got into trouble. That's how I found out he was an addict. I saw a needle in his arm. I remember after the wedding, he called off our reception. He transferred the party to my mom's house. Everybody was drinking. Johnny was fighting. The cops were going to take him away. And my mom begged him and said, come on, it's his wedding night. So the Maloofs had this beautiful suite for us, and Johnny didn't want to leave the area. So he took me to this dump, and he said, I'll be right back. I got to make a phone call. And I remember I walked into this room, and I put my bags down, and he walked out. He took off in my car, and he took off with, like, how they give you wedding money and all that. He was gone. And I was waiting for him to come back. I was humiliated. I was, I just felt like all these weird emotions, because we just got married. And so I remember calling my mom, and I said, change of plans. We're at this motel just in case, something happens. Well, the next morning at 7 a.m., there was a knock on the door. I thought it was Johnny. So I jumped up, went to grab the door, and I thought, I'm going to let him have it. Well, it was my mom. And I'll never forget the look on her face, David. Like, she was crying and screaming. I'm like, what's wrong? And she's like, thank God you're okay. Johnny's dead. And I said, Johnny's dead. What do you mean he's dead? And here, I wasn't even married 24 hours. And we walk out and she said they called her from the hospital. They found him in my car. He was DOA. They dumped him in front of a fire station and they ended up taking him to UNM hospital. So I remember on the drive there, all these thoughts were going through my head because I just, I had to go identify my husband's body. And so we get to the hospital and I'm just like, just still trying to process it. I'm not crying. I'm not, anything. I'm just like freaked out. As I'm thinking about it, all of a sudden I see this commotion and cops and security, and Johnny runs by me and he's like, "Hi babe, bye babe, love you babe." And he's in the hospital gown and I'm looking and you see like his butt cheeks and I'm like, what the hell? So, and he's gone and the police are chasing him. And I'm looking at my mom like, we don't, and I can't even explain what happened. I just know we get in the car, we're driving up Lomas, and it's a major street, and I'm looking and I see him running down the sidewalk. So we yell at him, he jumps in the car, gets in, and he's like, and I'm like, what happened? And he never had an explanation, but I remember he got home, ate like there was no tomorrow. Then he ended up falling asleep for like 3 days. Then when he gets up, he goes into the bathroom and says, "I'm gonna take a shower." Well, he didn't come out of the shower. I'm knocking on the door and I'm like, scared. Like, did he faint in there? Did he hit his head? Like, what happened? Freaking guy had snuck out the window and I didn't see him for a whole month. That was my first month of
And this is how your life continued, right? I mean, this is just, it
that
was
just
like,
the tip of the
he was
iceberg.
he was so up and down. But the thing is that his real lows, he would bounce back up and then go win a world title.
Yes.
That's what was so amazing about this guy.
Well, in the first year, though, it wasn't about boxing. So he was at the lowest that he's ever been. So he had been in the hospital on life support a couple of times in that first year. We didn't think he was going to make it. And
Wait up, hold on. A couple times the first year he was on life support?
Yes. And, we didn't think he was going to make it. And I remember that, when he was in jail the last time, you're talking about 1993, December of 1993. I remember sitting in our house. It was this little tiny house that I was paying for because I was the one working. I was the one with the car. He was out on the streets. Then when he went to jail, he had been there for 3 months. I talked to Paul Chavez. He wanted Johnny to get back in boxing. I let him come home, but I've had it with him, David. Like, I remember him saying, "I'm going to go visit my grandparents for Christmas." And of course I'm not going to stop him from seeing his family. But I told him, "You're not going to get high." Nope. Well, he didn't come home for 3 days. He came home, he was messed up. But I took it into my own hands for the first time. And that's what set the precedence of our future. Because I said, I'm done believing in you. You can't do it. I'm going to do it. So I remember he passed out.
So you took the reins at that point.
I did.
Did you believe in him in becoming a world champion?
Oh,
I mean, because at that point he wasn't a world champion yet, right?
No, he was undefeated, but he wasn't a world champion. So
he would hit these rock bottoms and then shoot up sky high.
Well, not in the first year. Remember,
Okay.
The only thing that I cared about was him surviving and being. I didn't know anything about boxing. I didn't know what Johnny was even capable of on that level. All I knew was that I loved this man and I wanted him to get clean. That's all that mattered. So when he got out of the jail and he went on his little escapade, and I got the key and I hid it in the carpet and he didn't know, and I had a wrought iron all around, nobody could get in or out, and I wouldn't let anyone in. I locked him in there. And
locked him you locked him in his house with wrought iron and you hid the key from him.
Yes.
You made him a prisoner of his own house, basically.
Yep. I was the warden.
Wait, to get him clean?
You know what? I'd like to say, that's why I did it. But I think as a woman, you just hit this level of insanity that you're going to do whatever it takes to just make things the way you want them. And that's what I did. I took the control and I said, this is going to happen. And I remember, David, like first week he was going through withdrawals. He was crying, begging me to get out of the house. Second week, he was angry. He broke everything in the house. We would sit there and we'd chase each other around because he was mad at me. But I noticed the third week, something magical started happening. He started running in place, doing sit-ups, push-ups. He started changing who he was as a human being. He changed. And for those 7 months, I was the happiest I've ever been in my whole life. Those were the happiest times of my life.
When he was clean?
Yep, because that's the only time it was.
So, and then that's when he dove into the dedication of boxing. And I guess from right then, and you were the you were the kickstart to him taking his career very seriously and
Yes.
quitting drugs and going off to win.
Quitting drugs,
Well, for
but
the time being,
for 7 months, and
for
he was
7
able to
months.
make his comeback, and he was able to win his intercontinental title. By the time he went for his world title, he was full relapse, full drug addict, full swing of everything you can think of, but he still won his world title.
So while this guy was a world champion, he was a drug addict.
Yes, always. It never stopped. So it was always, those 7 months was the only 7 months in our whole 20 years of marriage that he was clean.
So he wins his first world championship,
Yes.
and then so it's just now. Now I've heard he won 5. I know he won 5 world championships, but how many times did he flatline or die or almost die? How many times? I heard it was almost equal to the world championships, right?
Honestly, 7 times. Seven times that
hold
I
on.
was with him. In 20 years, it was 7.
7 times that this man flatlined, or he almost died, all the above.
Yes. I mean, was literally dead.
He's got me beat by 5.
Yeah. He was just like I said, Johnny was a force to be reckoned with, but he was a handful. So, that was my first time. I locked him in this place. He changed. He came back to boxing. I remember his first boxing fight. It was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, under Tommy Morris. And I remember being there, and I remember looking at David, and I was crying for him because I didn't want him to get hit. And he was like, "This is what I do. I'm good at it." So it's funny how I went from this wife who would cry to see her husband in the ring, because I was like, "I'll work 3 jobs, Johnny. I don't want you." I just wanted him to be clean. I didn't care about boxing. And next thing you know, here I am, catapulted into the sport of all men, and I became his manager. And of course, there's a lot of stories behind why I became his manager. Again, it's Johnny's antics. He was thrown out of the state of New Mexico. He was going to end up going to prison, or he had to get out. So there's just so much to go over. So you're going to have to pick and choose like what stories that you really would like to hear. But there's so many.
Well, I mean, I think, the Johnny story, I don't even think you could make a Hollywood movie about it. You'd have to make a series because it's so incredible. And then there's so much to it. His story alone, just you couldn't make a movie to do it justice. You'd have to have a series like 5 seasons long, maybe 10 seasons long to captivate this guy's existence, because it was just that crazy. He would like shoot to the moon and then shoot to the stars and then come down and hit rock bottom. Shoot to the moon, come down, hit rock bottom. Shoot to the stars, come back down, crash into rock bottom. And the only consistent thing he had throughout his whole life was you and boxing.
Yes. It's like I said, like I was telling you, there's so many stories. Sometimes he would shoot to the moon and then he would hit rock bottom, but it was simultaneously as well. Like when he fought Danny Romero, that's one of the people's, in their minds, one of their most favorite fights. But the funny thing, David, is it was the worst fight for me because he had been arrested. I remember, just to give you an example, I left him and my brother Robert up in Big Bear. And I took off to LA to go get a dress fitting. And I'm with this Christian lady, and she's this prayer warrior, and I go down to LA, I come back up. Well, my house is boarded up with plywood. And all the windows, the doors. And I'm looking, and I know what it's them, but I can't tell this lady that. So I said, "Well, let me go drive you to the shuttle." She said, "But what happened?" And she's all curious. And I'm like, I forgot they came and sprayed, and we're not supposed to stay in the house because it's poisonous. Because I was always good at making excuses. And so she, I drop her off and I go back and I'm looking around. I'm like, where are they? Where are they? And I couldn't find them. Finally, I hear like, and then I hear Johnny's little whistle, and I look up, they're freaking in a tree. They're sitting in a tree, and right in front of my house. And I'm like, and this is the logic I had to use with them being addicts, both of them. I'm looking up and I'm like, okay, what are you guys doing? Can't get mad with these people, And they're like, there's people running around, and the cops are after us, and we see a bunch of naked men trying to get us. And I'm like, And this is, like I said, the logic. Like, I'm watching them, and I'm like, okay, guys, I get it. So you're staking out our place. Yeah. And I'm like, you know what's smarter? We have cameras inside. You guys come down, you can sit in front of the cameras. And it was like a light bulb went off. They look at each other. Yeah. So they both climb off. I'm like, you got to take the plywood off. So I got them to take the plywood off the front door. They left it, but then they put it on the inside. So we're all trapped in there now, 3 of us, and I'm the only straight one. And I'm just like, and they're him and my brother are like this in front of the cameras. And just keep in mind, he's getting ready to fight Danny Romero. Danny's younger. Everyone's saying,
yeah. And hold on, for people that don't know, like a lot of my audience may not know Johnny Tapia and Danny Romero was probably to me the biggest rivalry in boxing, because they both are in the same weight division and from the same city of Albuquerque, and both became world champions, and they fucking hated each other, right?
Well, not in the beginning.
Okay.
Johnny worked with Danny's dad, Danny Sr. But what happened was when Johnny was exiled, because he didn't give up boxing. He was exiled from boxing the first time around. He was, he couldn't get into boxing. After his 4-year layoff, when he came back, Danny was about maybe 16, 17 and 0. He was the new star, the new boy in town. Everybody was on his bandwagon.
Good looking kid.
Yeah, and he was like the good guy, the white hat. Johnny was the one with the black hat. Nobody wanted Johnny to come back in Danny's world. So here comes Johnny, this full-blown drug addict, police records, you name it, troubled kid. So Danny did not want to share the limelight. So it started a beef.
So hold on. Yeah, that's important. That's probably more than anything what instigated or ignited Johnny Tapia's real drive to get back in the picture, because he was the star of Albuquerque. And then all of a sudden this young, good looking kid comes around, same weight division, and he becomes the star as Johnny is falling into drugs and addiction. He watches this Danny Romero kid rise to the occasion and become the new star of Albuquerque.
Yes, and people would tell him that everywhere we went. And remember, I didn't know boxing, so I didn't know who Danny was. I would look at Johnny like, what are they talking about? And he's, this kid, but I'm gonna get back one day. But I never believed it, and until I locked him up in that house, and it gave him the drive to come back, I had no clue what I was really doing. I didn't know where our destiny was going to lead. I only knew I just wanted him to be clean because I was afraid he was going to die. That was always my worry with Johnny. He's going to end up dying. So I didn't want, my whole job was I wanted to protect him. And so after, like I said, he made his comeback. He won his world title. He got into more problems with the law, got kicked out of New Mexico. Oscar De La Hoya opened his doors to us in Big Bear. He's the one that called me up and said, look, bring Johnny out here. There's no problems here. And I thank Oscar, and I will always thank Oscar. And Oscar actually changed Johnny's ring name from Babyface Assassin to maybe the Loca. That was all Oscar. But so going back,
who won the world championship first? Was it Danny or Johnny?
Johnny, which really,
Johnny won the title first.
Yes, which irked Danny.
So then that's when the rivalry began.
Well, it had already started, and I remember Johnny was with Top Rank first, and Danny used to be with Top Rank. And so at that time, Top Rank gave Johnny the opportunity, but you gotta remember, at that time, Johnny was like 25, 28 and 0. He still had more fights than Danny and was undefeated. And even though Danny was getting close up in those fights and undefeated himself, Johnny still had priority because, that's just how it was. And I remember we had the first world title in Albuquerque at the pit. And I remember Danny, telling Top Rank, oh, those fans are there because of me. And it started this rivalry. And then if they were going to go on the same plane, Danny would say, I'm not riding on the plane with an addict. So he started putting it out there. And so it turned. Johnny actually was trying to be like a big brother to Danny in the beginning. He was like, there's room for 2 champions. People would ask him about it. And he'd say, because Danny won his title right after Johnny. And Johnny'd say, there's room for both of us. And everybody would say, we're going to fight each other. But it was Danny who kept talking till it finally, you can't talk about somebody like Johnny and not expect a repercussion from that. And that's exactly what happened. So like I said,
and it was really like they were both from the opposite sides of the tracks, right? Kind of thing. Were they both from the same area of Albuquerque, or was one from one side of Albuquerque, the other on the other side?
No, same area, but
same area. So both from the same city.
Yes.
Same area, same weight class.
Yes.
And
what
both
are the odds, right? Yes.
Yeah, and so Johnny Tapia became world champion first, then Danny, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so they're both simultaneously holding world titles.
Yes, at the same time. Yeah, obviously. So when Johnny and Danny agreed to fight each other, Danny was so bitter he left Top Rank and signed with Cedric Kushner, and Johnny stayed with Top Rank. And I remember they had a fight. Johnny fought Jorge Barrera, which is Marco Antonio's brother, here in Albuquerque, and Danny fought. So that was their fight before they fought each other, July 18th, 1997. That was their first fight on the same card. It was one of the biggest paydays both of them had ever seen. HBO put it on their main network, which they didn't put Little Fighters on. And everybody was billing it as fight of the year, all these things. But for Johnny, it was real. So I remember April 30th, 1997. I'll never forget, like, we're in, Caesar's Palace and they're having the press conference. And Danny gave Johnny this look. Johnny jumped over the podium, literally jumped over it to attack Danny. Everybody. So after that, they had separate press conferences, separate weigh-ins. They had more cops. They had metal detectors because Danny was telling everybody, I'm going to knock him out third round, third row. And all of his, low life gangbangers are going to come after me. So that's why they didn't have the fight in Albuquerque. They had to have it in Las Vegas. There was so much.
But everybody from Albuquerque showed up.
You know what, David? If they weren't there, you could read about it. It was all over the news. It was the quietest night of crime Albuquerque has ever seen. Everybody was indoors watching that fight.
The world stopped. I mean, all of Southwest stopped. I remember all of the border towns, man. Everybody wanted to see this unbelievable matchup, this rivalry, man, that's never been matched today. I've never seen it matched in any sport.
Exactly. So you know what was funny about it though? So like I said, you're watching Danny Romero. He's training up in the mountains. He's at, I don't know how high of his altitude is. He has personal nutritionists, all that. Johnny fires Emmanuel Stewart. Johnny doesn't have a trainer. He's getting high. There, my house is bordered up with plywood. I'm like, what?
Okay, so you're trying to keep him clean while he's training for the biggest fight of his life, and he's and can I ask, like, can you just come clean? Like, what drugs was he doing? Cocaine, heroin? Wasn't he speedballing it?
He used to, but he stopped doing the speedballing after probably his first world title, and then he was stuck on just cocaine. And but up there, that particular time, he was on meth because there was no coke.
Meth?
Yeah.
So he was training on meth.
He wasn't training. That's my whole point.
Oh, he wasn't training.
And then he went to jail and he did all these things. So it was probably 4 weeks out. We had no trainer. I couldn't get him clean by myself. I finally called up Bruce Trampler and I said, look, we have a problem. Johnny's not training. They flipped. Because you got to remember, Danny left them for a different promoter. So Bruce was like, get him out here. So Bruce makes us go to Las Vegas. Again, there's no altitude or anything there. It's 3.5 weeks. He gets Jesse Reed in to hold the mitts for Johnny. And he has Eddie Fudge, who's giving him like corner advice, whatever. Johnny looked like crap. He was sparring. He was getting his butt beat. He just didn't look good. Everybody was worried, but Johnny wasn't. And Johnny would go on every interview and he has to kill me to beat me. And if he wins, I will kill myself. That's how sure I am that I'm going to win. But the guy wasn't training. And here, all of us were a nervous wreck. But I remember as we walked out and I saw the first couple rounds, there was just like a piece. I knew he had it. And again, like you said, highs and lows. He pulled off this beautiful performance, didn't even struggle. And then the headlines the next day was the easiest fight of my life with Johnny throwing a backflip.
God, what an incredible guy, man. I like a shooting star, man, like a shooting star, just, makes that impression and then passes away. How did he pass away? He passed away in his sleep in 2012, was it? Or 2012 he died, but how did he die exactly?
Well,
he finally met his maker.
So again, Johnny was very close to my brother Robert, and that was his right-hand man. My brother Robert passed away in a car accident on the way to visit Johnny, one of his many times where he was on life support. And because the media kept calling my brother saying that Johnny had passed away, and Johnny hadn't, and my brother wouldn't believe that. He thought I was trying to spare him, and we were living in Farmington at the time. So my brother and Johnny's nephew Benny jumped in a car on the way to see Johnny, and they both died in the car accident.
Hold on. They went thinking that Johnny was dead or gonna die?
They thought he was dead because the media was saying, give us a call.
So the media was saying Johnny died, and then your brother jumps in a car with
Benny,
who?
Johnny's nephew.
Johnny's nephew, and they die in a car crash on the way.
Yes. So I'm sitting in the hospital with Johnny, not knowing if he's going to make it. And I remember he finally wakes up and it's like, I don't know, like 5 o'clock in the morning, he comes out of his coma. At this time, my brother's missing. We don't even know he's gone yet. And I'm, and it's so weird, David. He had a spiritual like experience because he looked at me. He says, Rob and, Rob and Benny were here. And I said, what? No, they weren't. I've been in your room all night.
And this is before you knew they passed.
Mm-hmm. And just so you remember, so that was my brother. You probably remember him.
I do remember him. Yes.
So all I remember is I'm in this, because I had slept in this room. I never left his side. And I said, no, they weren't. And he said, yeah, he had me so convinced that they were there. He said, they were standing at the foot of my bed. I said, well, what did they say? And he said, they wanted me to go with them, but I told them that you would get mad at me. I said, well, where did they want you to go? And he's like, I don't know. Because remember, Johnny was in a coma, but he saw them. So then it changed the course. I called my sister-in-law, my mom. I said, I know where, because we used to call my brother Robert Gordy. I said, I know where Gordy's at. He came to Albuquerque. They're in Albuquerque. So everyone's looking for him in Albuquerque, everyone, not knowing that they had actually passed away. At the time that Johnny saw them was the time that they have of their time of death. So they passed away in a one-car accident. It was the beginning and the end for me. It was the beginning and the end for Johnny. It was the beginning and the end for a lot of us because you had to deal with this. And anyways, I ended up going to, when I found out he had passed, and I remember telling Johnny couldn't live with the guilt. Johnny went through a downward spiral like you wouldn't believe. And he ended up, just doing crazy stuff. He ended up they didn't think he was going to make it. He just kept doing just worse things than he's ever done because he couldn't live with the guilt. But so you fast forward now to 2012, he had, at that time, Johnny was just got out of prison in 2010 because he went to prison, and he got out in 2010. And I remember, David, he would look at me and he would always tell me, I'm running out of time. I'm running out of time. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he was just on this map, like, I got to get everything situated. I got to get this paid off. I got to do, like, he was just in a hurry. And I kept saying, what is wrong? And he told me, I had a dream. And my mom told me, it's time. I don't have any more lives left. So then he was on this race of time. So my brother passed away on, in March, but his birthday was April 30th. So every year we'd go to the gravesite and visit my brother. That year, Johnny didn't want to go with me in 2012. He said, I can't do it. I'm not feeling up to it. So there we were at the gravesite April 30th. And I remember I went separate from my sister-in-law. She took this picture. You can see my brother's face in the background. It was the most eerie thing. I didn't show it to Johnny till the next day, May 1st. And I just remember it freaked me out.
Hold on. She took a picture and you
the,
saw your brother's face that passed away in the picture.
Yes.
Okay.
So May the 1st, Johnny comes down the stairs and I'm like, Johnny, come here. Because remember, I'd been up all night because I was on the phone with her. We couldn't believe it. Johnny had been asleep. So the picture, even though she was at the gravesite earlier, it didn't download until later on that night for some reason. So I didn't wake up Johnny and tell him. So the next morning, he comes down the stairs and I remember I said, look, Johnny, look at this. I said, look at, and he got like the chills and I'll never forget it. And he's all, that's who they're sending for me, Robert G, because that's what he called my brother. And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean that's who they're sending for you? I said, why are you always so morbid? He like didn't hear a word I was saying, David. I promise you. He started going to the gym. He was training people and he was telling everybody his last interviews, I'm going to die soon, but this is what I want. So he kept telling me, I want to be buried. I want to have my memorial service at the pit. I want there to be Spanish music. I want everybody to be invited. I want it to be a huge party. He said, if you guys need to see me. But Whitney Houston had passed away that same year in March. And he had cried because he knew Bobby Brown. And he said, look at how they have her taking pictures of her in her coffin and all that. He said, don't you ever let them do that to me. And I didn't, David. No one has a picture like that. He said, send me away with dignity. Let them remember me as a champion. I want a closed casket, but I want a box. He set his own funeral. And it's funny because I was half listening because I thought he was being morbid, but he actually he felt something. There was nothing wrong with him. And I remember that week that he passed away, he was at the gym training and stuff. And I remember on a Wednesday, he came home and, he was off. Like Johnny wasn't his normal self. He was very quiet. He's usually hyper. Friday, I remember Nico, our youngest son, had strep throat, and I had him in bed with me. And I remember Johnny was standing in the bathroom, and I remember like he's looking over at us, and you know that thing fighters do, because you do it. You put the Q-tips in, and I always think, oh, I can't. I don't know how you guys can handle that. But he was seeing that thing in the mirror, and then like he stops and he looks at me, and he just gets all teary-eyed, and I'm like, what's wrong? And he starts crying, and he's like, I just love you. And I'm like, I love you too. And he's like, no, like I'm gonna miss you. And I'm like, where are you going, Johnny? And he's like, I'm not gonna be here. And I love you and I love my kids, but I know it's time to go, he told me. And I said, oh, Johnny. I said, why? I said, you're gonna outlive us all. You're gonna be that man that's 105, setting world records, probably still punching a bag. And he said, sounds good, but it's not gonna happen. And he's on, I love you, but I can't stay anymore. He said, I'm tired. And I said, what are you talking about? So I just remember like, and then, so he wrote me this note, and I still have 2 letters from him. And I remember Saturday was our other son's birthday. And so he celebrated with him, we sang happy birthday and everything. But I noticed that Johnny was very quiet. But again, nothing was wrong with him. And, he was still eating, all the stuff he ate, drinking his Dr. Peppers, eating his Snicker bars. And I just remember,
which goes back to his mom. That's what she gave him.
because before every fight, he had to have a Snickers bar and a Dr. Pepper to comfort him before he went in the ring, because that was the last thing she gave him. So that was such a big thing to him. He had to have that. That was his own way of comforting himself. So that, like I said, Saturday, it was my son's birthday. Everything was fine. Sunday, this is May the 27th. We all get up, everything is normal. I remember my sister came over, and she had brought animals for the kids, because it was my oldest one's birthday the day before and she didn't go. So she bought him an iguana, and she brought the little one a turtle. And so they were all showing their dad, their animals. And Johnny's like, oh yeah, that, playing with them, and everything was fine. And I just remember my sister wanted to take him to a movie. And she was saying, I want to go take him to watch Men in Black Part 3. And the kids, were excited to go. And she said, come with us. And I didn't want to go. And she said, why don't you want to come? I said, I don't want to go. Something in me just didn't want to leave Johnny. And I remember he had his man cave, because he would obviously sleep in my room, but he'd have his man cave because he was always relapsing, and he wouldn't let the kids see him high. So he would stay in his man cave. That's how life was conditioned then, So he was in his man cave, and he was watching sports. And I remember, looking at him, and I said, why don't you come with us? Let's go to the movie. And he said, I don't want to go. I want to rest, which is not unusual for Johnny. And, on a Sunday, he said, we used to do family time on Sundays. And he said, go ahead and go to the movies. When you come back, we'll do family time. And I just kept staring at him, and he was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, come with us. He's like, I don't want to go. And, we would always like play fight. He was like, he threw a pillow at me, and I was like, just come with us. And he's all, just let me go to sleep. I'm tired. And, but we were like laughing and joking. I was like, fine. I was like, whatever. And so I remember like backing away towards the door, and I was watching him, and he had this long pillow, and he would sleep like hugging it kind of. And he like opened one eye, and he looked at me, and he's like, what do you want? And I'm all, just come with us, Johnny. And he's like, I don't want to go. He's all, I'll see you when you get back. And I was like, well, I'll just stay. He's all, oh my God, get out of here. I just want to sleep. I want quiet. And he threw the pillow. And so I was like, fine. So I closed the door. And I remember walking down the stairs, and everybody's waiting for me. And as I'm walking away, David, I turn around, and I noticed that my house is the only one that doesn't have a number address. And I'm like, we don't have a number address. And I tell it to my sister and Pam, the lady that used to be our nanny. And they're like, so? And so we walk, we get in the car. I'm driving. I stop at Lowe's, and they're like, what are you doing? I said, we need an address. And they said, why? I said, I don't know. What if something happens and no one's ever going to know our address because there's no numbers? No logic to it, David. I don't know why I thought that. They were yelling at me at the store. They're like, look it, you have to drill them in. It's not like you could just put them up. And I was like, whatever. So we ended up going to a movie, and I was restless because Johnny would call me every 5 minutes, and my phone wasn't ringing. So I kept calling him, and he wasn't answering. And I remember just sitting there, and my sister was like, just, would you stay still already? You're worse than the kids. But I kept getting up, walking away, and I would sit down and walk away. And finally, I got like a sharp pain in my chest. And she's like, what happened? I was like, I don't know. I said, I think like maybe Johnny's heart's hurting. I don't know. It was weird. So finally the movie's over, and we rush home, and they're all downstairs. And I remember I ran up the stairs, and And I knocked on his door and he didn't answer. So I ran into our room and he wasn't in there. So I like looked all over and I didn't see him. And I just remember I was like, maybe I'm just feeling what I'm feeling is maybe I'm just feeling that maybe he took off to do drugs and maybe that's why I'm having anxiety. And so I remember walking away from his door and I was in like in the hallway. And then I just remember like something told me, go back. So I remember I went back to his door and I just remember like I opened it and I remember it was dark. And I remember I like tried to turn on the switch, but he had it off from it was a fan and the light, and he had it off from the fan. So I was like, he's not on the bed. You know what? I'm just losing he's gone. He just went to go do drugs. That's what's happening. So I remember I turned around and I started walking and something, David, like I just got like these chills. And I just remember thinking, go back in there. And everybody's downstairs, and I just remember I walked in there and I was like, I finally turned on the hallway light and I looked and he was on the floor. And the first thing that got my attention was he didn't have his shoes on. Now, if you knew Johnny, he was always ready to fight. Even in his house, he had to have his shoes tied. He didn't wear a shirt, he wore shorts, but his shoes had to be tied at all times because he said, I did so much bad shit. If somebody comes and tries to, like, retaliate, like, I got to be ready. So he was always ready to fight. And that's what got my attention because I looked and he had black shorts on and he had his socks on. And I was like, okay, he don't have his shoes on. And because it's not unusual, by the way, to find Johnny passed out. I found him passed out on the toilet, in the closet. I mean, so that wasn't what got my attention. So I remember I went and I knelt by him and I touched him and he was warm, but I just knew, like I didn't feel him anymore. Like there was no, I don't know, something disconnected. And I was like, I was looking at him and at first I was like touching his face and stuff. And then I just like got all like, I was like, you better not have left me, Johnny. If you left me, I will freaking haunt you. You're not gonna haunt me. I will haunt you. I was like, you wanted this life, and I'm like, So then I'm trying to shake him, and I'm like, just get up, Johnny, just get up. And he doesn't move. So then I'm like, oh my God, this isn't happening. And I'm like, I know what will save him, 911, because he'll come out of this. He always does. So then I start screaming downstairs, and my sister comes running up, and I'm like, can you wake him up? And I remember she walks in the room, and I'll never forget her face. She came out and she's like, and I'm like, shut up, don't say it. They said, if you're gonna tell me what I think you're gonna tell me, get out of my house. And so, but again, being a mom, I'm thinking about my kids. So I called Pam, our nanny. I said, get the kids out of here. She said, what happens? Just get them out of here. So she takes the kids, and Eva and me are arguing, my sister and me. And I'm like, just wake them up, just wake them up. And she's like, Teresa, I'm like, just wake them up. So she throws me the phone. She's all, call 911. So I call 911. Well, you know what goes in my head? We don't have an address. So I'm running out in the street and I'm like, you're not going to find me. And I'm not making sense. I'm like, I don't have an address. Like, you're not even going to know where I live, but you have to come. You have to come. So I don't even know what I lost that phone to this day. I don't even know what I did with the phone. I ran back inside. I just remember when everybody got there and stuff. And then I remember when they all came, they didn't let us go back upstairs. And I just remember like when the people came down, when I could see their face and they were like, ma'am, I was all, shut up. Don't tell me what you're going to tell me, because if you are, get out. But I knew it, David, but I didn't want to hear it, because if they told me it, then it becomes real. Then I have to deal with it. But if I didn't hear it, then they're going to wake them up. That's all I cared about. So they called my pastor and everybody came and they sat me down. They're like, we have to take them. And I'm like, I was like, you can't. So that they bring them down on, and they had him in that stupid black zipper thing, and he's on a bed in the living room, and they're telling all of us to say our goodbyes. And I'm like, and I know I don't make sense, but I'm like, you can't zip him up because he's not gonna be able to breathe. And they're looking at me like, we'll zip him up outside. But here's how it all kicks in. All the stuff he told me for that last month, don't let him see me in a body bag. Don't let him see me in a coffin. It's weird how I had a purpose. So I was like, okay, you know what? So I remember getting everybody, don't let nobody see him. And we had helicopters, we had like TV vans out there. We had so many people. There was hundreds of people that had heard about it. It was already all over. All the team like hover over him. They never got a clear shot. They load him his funeral service, you had to have a special band in order to have an open casket to see him. So I still protected him, and I just went into protection mode. Like, I didn't deal with him dying. I dealt with, okay, he said he wanted this. Okay, I got to call this person. I got to get the pit. I got to do this. I got to do. So I planned everything the way he wanted it, and even down to the last detail of him going like lowered into the ground. He wanted his music on. So I had his he had these beats. Some beats had just come out. And he had the beats on, and he had his iPod, and we lowered him, with the Spanish music. So I did everything he wanted. And it's weird how you think you're not listening, but you are. But it was just, anyhow, it took 3 months for them to get the autopsy. They sent his stuff all over the world. They kept, because it wasn't drugs. It wasn't. So if you look at his autopsy, and I'll send it to you for your own read, because it's going to come out anyways in his book. I mean, in his movie. But it says maybe, probably, could have. They don't know the cause of death. Basically, his heart stopped. No rhyme, no reason.
It was just his time.
Yeah, but he said it. He told everyone, you all think I'm going to go out with a shootout or having this or go out with drugs. He's all, you know what's going to happen? He said, my heart's going to stop because I'm tired and I'm going to fall asleep and it's going to be peaceful. And we were like, whatever, Johnny. And he's like, whatever, don't believe me. He would always say that. I'm telling you, I know myself. And that's exactly what happened, David. His heart stopped.
Yeah, I remember the news when he died, man. I was bawling like a little kid.
Yeah.
And I was just happy I got to know the guy. But it is a tearjerker.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And
He made an impact on everyone's life, man. Anyone who ever met that guy, he made an impact, and he has an incredible story. So are you in the process now of making a movie about his life? Is that going to happen?
I am. So I'm working with, you can look him up. He's a very sought after director and writer. His name is Ben Bray Hernandez. And interestingly enough, is his brother was in the U.S. Olympics with Johnny, the Junior Olympics. So this has been a passion of his for years, and he didn't get a hold of us since Johnny was alive. And he recently, a few months ago, came out to Albuquerque, and he found me. And I just met with him the other day, and and so it's just what you said, just like what you said. The story is so much. He said, you have 110 pages to tell a story. He said, I am having a hard time. He said, I'm 65% in. He says, I have the beginning, the middle, all that. He's all, this is the hard part. Where do you go from here? And he said, I have to do the best job I can to capture the essence of who Johnny is and who Johnny was and what you all meant. He said, but at the same time, he said, I only have 110 pages to do it. So he said, I really think this needs to be a series after we get the feature film. He said, because you guys, there's not even enough seasons. How many? So think about how many shows and episodes, starting from his youth to the first time in boxing, to this, all the stuff that's happened. And he's on, it continues on because now there's the legacy. He's getting inducted to Hall of Fame. He has books, movies, obviously. Kids are growing up, kids are fighting. So he's like, how do you tell it all?
I don't have an answer for that. All I could do is give you this interview right now, and this was my token of appreciation because I've always wanted to help out the most I can, and he really was a major figure in my life. Watching him fight inspired me to go on and become a heavyweight champion boxer, win a few belts myself, not world belts, but I made a little splash, and I suffered from a lot of this stuff Johnny did: anxiety, depression, addiction to alcohol, which I just quit. And so this is my thank you to you, Teresa, for being friends of mine. And I wanted to highlight Johnny Tapia. Good news is you're still in boxing. You got a promotional company there with Robert, and Robert is the matchmaker. You guys got fights coming up at Into the Mountain Gods. The legacy of Johnny keeps living. The Johnny Tapia legacy is still alive and well, folks. It's at Into the Mountain Gods, and it's going to be November 20th at Into the Mountain Gods in Ruidoso, New Mexico. It's going to be a star-studded fight card, and you got Marco Antonio Barrera versus Ponce de Leon. Robert, you want to go into the card since you haven't had a chance to speak?
Oh man, what a great card we're gonna have for you guys. I mean, two world legends, man. Marco Antonio Barrera versus Daniel Ponce de Leon's, two former world champions. One of Johnny's former opponents was Marco Antonio Barrera, and that was one of the fights. That was one of the fights of the year. And what did Johnny say right after that fight? Hey, let's do it again. You know, I mean, let's give me another black eye and let's do it again. You know what I mean? That was the type of person Johnny was. He was just, at the end of a fight, he was just, that fun-loving guy that you loved, and then we've got a couple of good PBC fighters coming on the card, and just to go to the bottom half of the card. And one of Johnny's fighters will be fighting on that card as well. It's Josh Torres, and he's going to fight an exciting guy. You might know who he is. He's going to fight Kendo Castaneda out of San Antonio, Texas. He was
the tough guy. The kid's tough.
Yeah, the kid's tough. Formerly, he was promoted by Roy Jones. So Josh got a.
So these are real. These are going to be some action-packed fights.
Right, and you know me, David. I'm a hardcore matchmaker, man. You're going to go into a fight. You're going to fight a fight. If
you're going to fight your ass off. You could die.
If you're going to fight under me, you're going to fight. I'm one of the most aggressive matchmakers out there.
And you know what? When I was fighting in Texas and when you were part of the commission,
yeah.
Man, I used to love seeing you, man. But I always knew, man, if Robert's involved in the fights, it's just going to be tough. If Robert gets to pick anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fans deserve it. The fans deserve good fights. Right. You know what I mean? And they pay good money to go see good fights. So I'm not going to give the fans what I'm going to give the fans what they came to what they paid to come to see.
And you're one of the best in the business. Yeah, Abel Mendoza's fighting as well. Abel Mendoza, his record is what now? What's Abel Mendoza's record?
He's 30-0 now, and he's fighting a guy that's got 127 fights.
Jesus.
So yeah, he's stepping it up a little. And this is the guy.
We got some wars coming. We got some good.
Yeah, we got some wars coming. So it's gonna be great, man.
Folks, I'll be there if you're in Ruidoso. I'll be there.
We have David Rodriguez commentating for the fight. He's gonna learn Spanish, and he'll be able to translate.
Right.
This is great, and so that's November 20th. Into the Mountain Gods. Right. Ruidoso, New Mexico, at the casino. Casino. And Teresa, where can people find you to get tickets and your books? Make sure you show your books.
Okay, so the tickets are going to be on sale only through the Into the Mountain Gods website.
Okay.
But I wanted to also tell you, so Johnny has his 7th Hall of Fame boxing induction coming up in Hollywood. It's the West Coast Hall of Fame, October 17th. 7th one. He made Canada, the WBC. So like we talk about the legend, he keeps going. And here he is, not even here.
You got to lift that up a little higher, Teresa.
People are still recognizing, his accomplishments. And
the legend lives.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Mi Vida Loca and the Ghost of Johnny Tapia. Man, I thank you guys for coming on. I'm gonna air this tonight on YouTube, on FluffTube. I'm trying to mix it up a little bit, and I want to dive into boxing a little more. I'm coming back, Robert. I'm coming back, but in a different way, But I think this could be more impactful because I want to start highlighting fighters. As we get closer to the fight, I'd like to get your main event on here and start and get some exposure for boxers because
I need to learn Spanish.
Yeah.
You got to learn Spanish.
I got to learn. No, muy bien, pero estoy aprendiendo. But I love you guys, man. You're like family.
I love you, Dave.
And thank you. And guys, we'll just keep highlighting fighters and promoting your shows. So what's the name of your promotions, Teresa?
It's just Tapia Promotions.
Tapia Promotions. And they
it's
can
not
go
just
to
Tapia Promotions, it's Tapia Promotions.
Tapia Promotions.
He puts it out there like it's just how it goes.
But wait, they could go to the Into the Mountain Gods for tickets, right?
Right. And the name of the card is La Última Batalla, The Last Stand.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you. God bless you. And I'll keep in touch with you guys. And I'll be there November 20th.
Okay, we'll be expecting you. Thank you. Bye.